Cyborg Assassin 1, Final Chapter, Chapter 21, Exodus. Finley got out of bed when a young Mayleedian man entered his dormitory and gestured to the door he left open. The SAC's undercover operative took a slight step back and eyed other prisoners who shook their heads as a warning not to leave. It could be a trick. Perhaps the guards would murder them all once they walked away, shoot them in the backs. But he exited alone and peeped around the wooden door in any case. Drunk prison guards streamed out from their noisy bar, which had kept Finley awake every night for the week he'd stayed since his capture. As they stumbled in groups of 2s and 3s, the apparent liberator, also clad as a communist prison guard, stood frozen to the spot. Without the determination on his face, he looked as young as Finley. The black Bolivian prisoner whom he supported tried to jerk away, but he couldn't move on his crippled legs with only one crutch. A male troop shouted, "Hey!" at the albino-skinned defender. He slurred as he staggered towards them. "What are you doing with my torture subject?" His friends laughed behind him. When the tormentor's gaze reached the Bolivian with crooked legs, he cocked an eyebrow in surprise and asked the liberator the same question. The Mayleedian, who'd left a couple of doors opened, forced a watery smile in place and shrugged. The man jerked around and called to his friends, "Is he even one of us? I don't think he understands a word I say." "Maybe he drank too much," a woman shrieked before laughing. "The vodka was strong, too much for a kid perhaps." Their laughing faces morphed from relaxed to serious when the tormentor shook his head and continued to frown. The more questions the liberator couldn't answer, the angrier the voices became, until several wardens were shouting. Frankie swallowed as the silhouettes of 2 officials with box-shaped shoulders stepped into the red light. They marched towards them from the end of the wide avenue between rows of buildings. As they proceeded, the guards' aggression increased. One guard kept jabbing a finger into Zing's shoulder, and another knocked the hat off Frankie's head. Every muscle became rigid when another guard noticed the blood in Frankie's hair. He touched it, then withdrew his fingertips to show his companions. Their shouts grew in volume until they noticed the 2 officers. They stood aside and saluted. One officer narrowed his yellow eyes at Frankie and whispered. Still he didn't understand. Someone shouted down the avenue, and the silhouette of a man in a trench coat stepped into the infrared. He'd recognized that bouncing gait anywhere. Frankie's heart skipped a pulse. When Dave reached them, he spoke in a low tone. The wardens and officials' suspicious faces broke into smiles and laughter, and they shooed them away. "Come on, lad," Dave said in his language, Sienese. "Give the Bolivians to the guards. Time to go home." "What? What did you tell them?" You have a hatred for Bolivians and wanted to take him away to torture yourself. You can't make him stay here." "Lad, they were about to kill you both." He put a hand on Frankie's shoulder and turned him around. "Lucky your sparry cat woke me up to warn me." "No!" Muscled tight, he twisted towards the men who were bustling Zing away. He aimed his rifle and pulled the trigger 2 times. The men fell down, shouting and screaming. Others aimed their weapons at Frankie. Their commander shouted something and they ripped him away from Dave. The officer drew back a fist and punched Frankie hard in the stomach. Winded, his knees buckled. "Stay down!" Dave's machine gun exploded in a rain of bullets, killing the jailers. Tears welled up as Frankie pressed his hand over his ears, but the deafening sound permeated through his hands, numbing his senses of hearing and speeding his pulse. Dave beckoned to him. His voice came out muffled and distant. "Hurry, we don't have time." He lifted him and started walking away with him. "You can't leave Zing here. He's the whole reason I came." "He broke his legs. What do you think we can do with him?" Zing squirmed on the ground between bloodied corpses, shaking his head in denial, then said something to Dave. Dave jerked around and marched towards him. He asked questions in Vortanese. Zing replied. He says there are tanks we can escape in with the captives. He shot Zing another question. Zing replied. Again. Dave nodded. The lad says the tank's keys are in the security booth. Frankie rubbed absently at an arm as he scanned the carnage. Dave had killed his own to save him. You can't go back home. You just killed your own people. I can say you did it all. It happened before I got here. You go to Zarita. But there's cameras. Frankie pointed towards some overlooking from high on the buildings. We'll destroy the tapes, Dave said. Do it when we get the keys for the tanks. Zing's shoulders tremored as he asked Dave a question. Dave replied, then turned to Frankie. We'll take you and the others too. Warmth infused Frankie's body. Zing pointed at the security cameras and mentioned something. Dave's lips pinched together as he bent down and wrapped Zing's arm over his shoulders. His eyes flashed towards Frankie. You let the prisoners out. I'll take your friend to the tank. He said something in Vortanese, tilting his head towards Zing. The Bluvian replied. They're big things. We should be able to squeeze about 10 people in each one. The lad says there are 6 tanks. He left Frankie and dragged the Bluvian towards the exit gate. Frankie ran to the front of the nearest building. He unlocked the door and pushed it open. Bunk beds carrying fear-stricken captives lined the 2 walls with a gangway down the middle. Let's go, you're free. The shaved-headed captives spoke in their foreign tongue, shrugging and pointing at him. He cleared his throat. Can anyone understand what I'm saying? Nothing. He rushed towards a red and black striped woman and yanked her hand. She blubbered. His hands became limp and he released her, then ran out of the door, leaving it open. He ran to the next building. Can anyone speak Xianese? You're free! You're free! He got the same response, so he left the door open too, and did the same to the next 2 dormitories. At the last and 6th dormitory, a little boy said, I know what you're saying. I'm from Exorius. Can you speak Vortanese? I've lived here long enough. I can. Come here. Frankie clutched his small hand and pulled him off the bottom bunk. Hurry, I'm freeing you all. They got outside and Frankie pointed at the 5 open doors. Go to every dormitory and tell them they're free. Shout it out. Tell them that me and my friends have slain all the guards and we'll take the tanks to a safe place. A gappy grin broke out on the boy's pale brown face. He turned towards the darkness of his dormitory. Manis, Manis! Wamila Manis! The captives poured out of the building as the boy sprinted to each opened door. Dave met them at the gate and sent a few prisoners back to help the frail and disabled. Some walked alone in a daze across the scrubland, and Frankie ordered the boy to bring them back to the tanks. When the last captives arrived with those unable to walk, Dave made sure they went in one of the 6 tanks. First, 6 men and women volunteered to learn to drive the tanks, and they soon worked out how the machines functioned. Bang! Dave took a bullet to the shoulder and staggered back 3 steps. Frankie's heart stuttered as he peered through his rifle's scope and found the culprit hiding in a tower. It took 3 shots to get her, and she wedged a bullet through a prisoner's heart within that time. Good job, lad. It's a bloody good job you stole that rifle instead of the sniper, you sneaky bastard. Dave shouted at the crowd in panic, and the children climbed into 2 of the tanks. He scrubbed a hand over his face and shouted something else. Eventually, 12 volunteers stepped forward. Dave gathered them around the tank and they joined the children. Dave spent a couple of minutes inside each tank and the turrets rotated. When he exited, they rotated again and they pointed to the sky. Boom, 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 boom. Dave rushed to the door of each tank, nodding and yelling inside. This time, someone appeared from each hatch. They directed the tank's guns away from the crowd and fired. Many prisoners covered their ears. Children from inside the tanks wailed. Dave nodded and yelled commands at the groups and organised more people into the vessels. Despite his injuries, he laughed as he ordered groups and individuals around, then stood back to watch. "The rest can cling on to the sides," Dave said to Frankie. "You ready on your hoverboard?" Frankie nodded, then reached into his pants and pulled out the hover. He rubbed his thumb over the square's rough surface so it unfolded into a full-sized hoverboard with handlebars. Dave gaped. "Where'd you get that?" "From Hidden City." "You think you can lead them the way?" "It'll take a long time to get there, mind. They'll need brakes and water." "What about you?" "Return home with the sparry cat." "You've got to come with us. The communists are all going to know you helped. The cameras, the footage could be streaming somewhere." "Nah, I already told you. I ain't living in no cave. Besides, they wouldn't let our sparry cat in." Frankie's heart skipped a beat. "Our sparry cat? He's like the big brother I never had." A tank exploded. Dave gripped his roots and pulled. "Shit! I forgot about me mates." His eyes bulged as he stared in disbelief at the communist tank towards them, which had sent a torpedo into the other. I informed them when you left, said I'd go fetch ya." He yelled something in Vortonese. An explosion shook the tank. Finley's muscles tensed, ready to attack. He'd been lucky to get control of the turret. The laser cannon in his forearm was small but better and quicker than the ancient smoothbore gun the tank possessed. "Access right-hand laser cannon," he said in his mind as a holographic laser target appeared in his central vision. He poked the mechanic hand out of the turret, aimed at the enemy tank, and blasted it. Blue light flashed from the tank's turret and the attacker's tank exploded. Boom! Frankie's ribcage tightened as two figures leapt and rolled from the burning vessel. As he covered an elbow over his nose in the attempt to filter the smoke, he stared at the woman and man. He noticed that he would notice that electric blue Mohican and the large Mayleedian guy anywhere, Dave's terrorist friends. Jessica screamed as her arms and legs burned. She rolled the flames away. Sam's dreadlocks heaped into a bulky top knot over a face covered in blood. He marched towards Dave. "What the fuck's going on here?" "A prisoner had a meltdown and shot all the guards." "Don't you fucking lie. I saw the drone's footage, you fucking traitor." As the two men argued, Frankie noticed Jessica aiming her gun at prisoners who'd left the tank and were running away. Another blue flash shot through the air. She dropped dead to the ground, torso a few feet away from her legs, and inners all over the dirt. Frankie aimed at Sam with his self-aiming rifle, and the man's head exploded when he pulled the trigger. As rescuees checked the remains of the vessel and corpses, a few wailed in horror. At least the children weren't in that first tank, Frankie thought. Dave stuck his fingers in his mouth and whistled so loudly that those clinging to the sides of the tank cringed. He beckoned for the fleeing prisoners to return, but they didn't. Instead, Olior came running from the horizon, his tongue hanging out. Dave laughed, then pressed his hand against his own shoulder and winced. A man sitting on the tank slipped off and spoke. "Says he's a doctor," Dave told Frankie. "Insists I go inside while he sorts me out." "Go then, take Olior too." The man led Dave and the sparry cat into the tank. When Finley had cybernetic limbs fitted to the parts the space slugs had eaten away, he'd had brain surgery too, like all the cyborgs. His nanocomputers connected to his eardrums, eyes and gustatory senses so he could perceive more quickly and easily than an average person. He was ready and had his laser cannon poking out of the tank's turret before the fighter jets came. 3 zoomed over the horizon. He aimed and shot each down before they could fix their guns on the targets. "Who are you?" the driver asked. "Someone who's on your side." "How do you even shoot without looking?" "I have superior weaponry, but I'd rather not talk about it." "Look, Mummy," a girl said. "His metal hand just changed shape." Frankie's frown didn't leave his forehead as he levitated onwards, looking for more attackers on hoverboards or in tanks or planes. He didn't know who possessed that laser weapon, but knew which tank it was that it had fired from. If they ever reached the caves, he'd make sure to find out. They must have killed all their adversaries, for no one followed them to the coast or the cave, but no more tanks came, and no one confronted them. Not a soul was to be seen as Frankie went on ahead. What had been his and Dave's home nestled around the side of a mountain. Their tanks didn't go close to the communist base as they headed north over tundra towards the coast. They parked their tanks a few bays along from Hidden City's cave, and Frankie made sure he and Dave knew exactly who had fired the laser cannon before anyone got out of that particular tank. "It was me," a Sax boy around Frankie's age said. "Where did you get the laser tech?" Dave asked. "I work for the Mayleedians. I'm here to help." "A special op?" Dave asked. "I know who you are." The Sax boy squinted at Dave through blue eyes. "Don't tell anyone about me, and I'll return the favour." "But we know about you," a man from the tank said. "We saw your hands." Frankie quirked a brow as he stared at the boy's hands. He wore black wool gloves over his beige skin. "Let's see," Frankie said. "Another time. Let's get somewhere safe first." It took a long time to get the escapees to walk to the bay with the cave. Some were still strong enough to swim once they reached the underground river. They couldn't keep their patience to wait as the boat went back and forth through the tunnel, collecting and dropping off asylum seekers within the networks of Hidden City. It proved too difficult to get all the people over the abyss, so Frankie ran ahead and demanded the five sisters send assistants and hoverboards to help the escapees over the crevice. The helpers tied seats to the back of 4 hovers and harnessed each rescuee in before levitating over the gaping mouth of the hole over and over again. Zarita Isa and the 4 other sisters who ruled over Hidden City met them inside and had cleared the area of plants and furniture to let all the refugees in. Isa flew into Frankie's arms and kissed him on his unburned cheek. "Dinka!" She followed her stepbrother, medics and other seriously injured prisoners to the hospital, leaving the malnourished with no life-threatening conditions to listen to a man introduce Hidden City to them. Finley gaped around at the multi-story forest surrounding a cave's gigantic crevice. He must have been the only undercover op to ever come to this mysterious place. Their drones had never made it in before because of the high security doors. Thankfully, those doors didn't seem to detect his cyborg assemblies. He should keep his secret safe while determining what to do next. He ducked behind a bush and sneaked away as an assistant helped the needy. Someone put their hand into Frankie's, and he looked down in surprise to see the little boy who had helped interpret his message to the captives. Don't you want to know what your friends are saying?" the 6-year-old asked. "I can guess. It's all right. I have a translation device at home." "You have a home?" Frankie nodded. "I had one up there and now have one here. I meant I left my interpretation device at the home above the ground." "Will you be going back there?" "No way. But you have a home here too?" "I do." "Can I come?" the boy asked. "Of course." "Can we come too?" Dave opened his trench coat. Olior panted and yelped from within. Heat radiated through Frankie's chest. He swayed on the spot. "Don't let anyone see him. Come to mine for a bit, but get that bullet wound looked at afterwards. Do us a favour, lad." "What?" "Don't tell anyone what I did." Don't tell them you rescued them." "That's all right. They can know I'm a turncloak. Just don't tell them what I used to do for the communists." "I won't. But what about that Nerthus guy with the laser gun?" I noticed him hide away. It's all right. He'll find us when he's ready. The end. I hope you enjoyed Cyborg Assassin 1. I'm going to format it next and I'll publish it sometime, and it will be completely free on Amazon and also on all of the other ebook places like Kobo and Apple Books and stuff like that. And if you do download it for free, you'll find a link inside. So if you sign up on my mailing list, then you can get Cyborg Assassin 2 for free as well. And that will be at least 40,000 words also. Yeah, it would be really nice if you could join my mailing list. Okay, well, thanks for listening. And if you want to search for any of my other books, you can check out my name, which is Raina. Yeah. And I think you just check it out on Amazon and you'll find me right away. And you can actually click on my name, go to my author page and find all of the books I've written. My first 2 series are space fantasy time travel, so a very different subgenre, but they're also set within the Planet Alliance. And you can get a free prequel also called Prequel to the Firesnake. And then my military sci-fi books with cyborgs and techno thriller, they're also set in the Planet Alliance, but there's no magical time travel in that subgenre. And you might enjoy reading YuFu's Run. So far, I've published 5 books in that series. And yeah, I won't give you any spoilers about that, actually. Okay, so thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed my narration. And I'm sorry about the points where I pause and make little mistakes, because I'm killing 2 birds with 1 stone and going through the final edit while I'm reading this aloud to you. Okay, well, thank you very much.